Huge fight coming up March 1st. We got Tank Davis stepping in there against Lamont Roach. We just had their first press conference, and I had a few things that I pulled from it while I was watching the press conference. Number one, I think the event may be a little bit too big for Lamont Roach. I think it may be getting to him just a little bit, right? And I say that because number one, when he was talking, I could have swore I heard his voice waver just a little bit, right? Like you're just a little bit nervous. There's more cameras and more lights and more people than you're used to in this press conference. And I thought I heard his voice just waver a little bit. Like, one of those situations where he wasn't quite sure what to say. He realized everybody was looking at him. So that's one thing that I wonder about. Number two, he seemed a little bit unsure during the face-off of kind of what to do. Like when he was up there flexing for a second, then he put his hands down and then he was looking some places, just tiny little cues in the body language. And the other thing from the face-off is when he stepped in there, he started chuckling, kind of smirked a little bit. And usually that's a response that you'll see from a guy when he's just a little bit nervous, right? One of those self-defense mechanisms. And I always wonder about how guys are going to handle the events. And the two biggest fighters that come to my mind are Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. And literally, when you were talking about these guys, there wasn't a stage that was too big. There wasn't a stage in the world that would have been too big that would have intimidated either one of those guys. But we always saw their opponents become intimidated. Anytime they were fighting guys who also weren't like absolute superstar, top of the food chain type guys, the lights would be a little bit too big and those guys would get intimidated and potentially even lose the fight before they stepped in the ring. If you're nervous, if you're unsure, if you're not quite got a grasp in your arms around the situation, it can affect you on fight night. The most recent example of that comes to my mind was Edgar Berlanga. I'm telling you, man, I got the feeling constantly in the build-up to that fight with Canelo that it was just too big for him and he was overwhelmed and he just started to see, as the fight got closer, the enormity of the event. One of the other things that I pulled from this one was the Tank seems locked in, man. I mean, he was staring a hole through dude while he was up there giving the talks. During the face-off, he was staring a hole through him. Even when he was turning away, he was kind of still looking at him a little bit. Tank seems locked in. And he needs to be, because the last thing that I observed from this was his talk about retirement. He's talking about hanging the gloves up potentially at the end of 2025. Okay? And even though we haven't seen Tank slip, even though we haven't seen his performance like as though he's letting off the gas pedal at all, one of the things about combat sports is that when you hear a guy talking about retirement, you have to be concerned that one foot is already out the door. You have to be concerned that he's already spending energy and thought process and everything for retirement afterwards. And it's one of those catch-22s because you need a fighter to think about what he's going to do after fighting, because after fighting is going to be a much longer period of his life than while he's fighting as a pro. So you need to think about the money and what you're going to do and all of that kind of stuff. You have to. But you can't think about it too much because you can't allow it to take from what you're doing right now, which is fighting. Fighting is so intense. One small mistake, man, just one tiny misstep, and it's all over. You lose a little bit of motivation and you're not going into the gym. You got a young, hungry dude in here who's just can't wait to tear your head off, training as hard as he can every day to steal what you got. So it requires you to be completely locked in, giving 100% all the time, right? All in, all the time, that kind of a concept. So when you hear a guy talking about retirement, you worry, is he giving a little bit too much energy to that? Is he thinking about it a little bit too much? When you're taking over, you're talking, man, I want to see a therapist. I got 2 daughters. I need to be a little bit more soft. Like, I respect that more than you could imagine. The man's talking about evolving. The man's talking about becoming a better version of himself, right? Completing who he is as an individual. That's phenomenal stuff. But I'm only thinking about it in the sense of, could it potentially make him a little less prepared come March 1st? Is his energy just being pulled a little bit? Is it somewhere else? Because that's not what I want to see. I want to see Tank come in there and just absolutely locked in. Now, look, I've already talked about this fight a little bit. I've already made a little preview for kind of a first thoughts. And I said, I think Lamont Roach, although he is a very skilled fighter, he's going to have more than his hands full when not only him moving up to 135, but fighting a guy who's incredibly skilled and has a way better resume. Right, the strength of schedule, the level of competition that Gervonta Davis has faced and defeated is far more than Lamont Roach has stepped in the ring with. So as much as I want to see this fight, we know Tank's going to be a huge favorite, and he's going to be a huge favorite for a reason. I think he's going to come in there, and I think he's going to look very good that night, particularly as the fight goes on. But let me know what you guys think. Did you see this press conference? What did you pull from it? Do you think each man's going to be locked in? And what's up with this retirement talk coming from Gervonta Davis? Let me know.